This show brought to you by Circle of Seven Productions, www.cosproductions.com. Please be sure to subscribe and welcome to our circle.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Patricia W. Fisher with Readers Entertainment Radio, and I'm doing something new this year for the holidays. I am actually trying to interview an author a day or so because there's too many holiday books and there's too many amazing authors that to feature just once a week. So I thought we'd do something fun. And that also gives you more ideas for Christmas ideas, hint, hint, and also things that you can buy for yourself after the crazy of the holidays winds down. So today I have Tracy Solheim, and she's been on the show before. She is a USA best-selling author. She used to work in television. She went to the Seoul Olympics. She has amazing books, and she's also having some construction and remodeling done to her house today. So if we hear noise, it's fine. Nothing crazy is going on in her house. And so we welcome you to the show today, Tracy. How are you?
Thanks. I'm great. It's great to be back. I appreciate, being invited back.
Well, I know. And, I was thinking about you because we, of course, watched the Olympics in Japan. That we're in Japan. I didn't say we were in Japan, but
right.
Because one of the divers, Jordan, was he goes to the University of Texas, and my daughter had just gotten accepted, and she was heading up there like within the month, and so of course we watched it, and his story was amazing, and I think they really did some lovely stories this year, like backstories of a lot of the athletes, especially I think it was that positive energy that so many people needed for just because of COVID and being home. What was
right.
One of your favorite backstory when you went?
Oh my gosh, I think we worked on a lot of that, beforehand. There was a lot of that done
right.
in New York before we got to Seoul. But when we got to Seoul, obviously there was a lot of stuff that was going on, and that was when Greg Louganis, speaking of divers, fell and hit his head. And he came to the studio the next day, and actually I think he was being interviewed on the Armed Forces Network, which we shared. We let them use part of our studio. It's kind of like, some sort of agreement they had beforehand. So he came in, and it was just really amazing to talk to this guy who literally, if you saw it, I was surprised he was even walking around at this point because he really hit his head hard. And I remember him showing the stitches and all this kind of stuff. I think I have a picture of me with him where he's leaning down. But it was just such an amazing story. I was like, you're going to go back and do this some more? And he said, I've trained for this my whole life. And, if the doctors are clearing me, I'm going to do it. And it was just kind of, here I was, if I stubbed my toe, there was no way I was getting back out there. You know what I mean? And I think that these athletes, they have something more, something deeper that just propels them on. And that was probably the most fascinating discussion I had with any of the athletes there. It was very cool to watch.
Since then, every time one of the divers, especially the platform dives, when they jump and they jump forward, like they're facing back and they jump, I'm like, every one of them's like, just waiting for one of them, and they never do, thank goodness. Wow.
No, they get it right, and it's a gift, I think, for a lot of these athletes. Like I said, there's something deeper within them that just propels them. It's amazing to watch.
I mean, you see all these amazing stories, and of course, I know that any creative mind is going, I could do something with that story, and I could do something with that. And but it's also interesting because we start to see, just basic human nature at like the umpteenth level of amazing.
Right.
So you have what is it? Michael. He's a swimmer.
Michael
Why
Phelps?
is his name? Thank
Michael
you.
Phelps. Michael Phelps.
And there was that whole thing going on with the Australian or South African swimmer, and it was very interesting to see the dynamics. And the funniest thing was, Michael's like really in the zone, you can tell, and the other diver's kind of walking in front of him and stretching. And I looked at my kids. I'm like, you see that? That's how you guys act sometimes when you think you're trying to make somebody mad. Look, there it is right there.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, wow. And I'm like, it didn't stick, though. They don't remember it. But, it didn't apply it. But, it's interesting to see that whole dynamic go on. But so you were talking about sharing with Armed Services Radio, but, like, your first books were of 3 West Point classmates. And then,
well, actually,
you know,
those were.
Yeah, go ahead.
Those were the most recent series before I got back into these last two books. My first books were actually a football series, and then the small town back into. But yes, I did do. They were three classmates at West Point, and then they became Secret Service agents. I kind of like dealing with, you know, I like thinking in terms of a trio of books. I don't know why. I think because I like reading them that way. You know, you finish a book and you want to get to the ending, but you don't want it to end. And I love to go back and catch up with the other characters. So I tend to always think in terms of three. Some of them grow a little bigger. But that one, you know, you had the three characters. There is another character there that could potentially pop out. But she's actually named after a real person. And she wants to pick who her love interest will be. So we'll see.
That's
but
fair.
Yeah, I think it's fun to, you know, I love to, at the bond of brothers, I guess, was for that one in particular. Just, you know, what they went through and what they had to go through at work and things. So.
And it's cool because it's almost like a 3-act play because, you know, you get to know a little bit more about each of them as you're going through, especially if you have like that thread of something they're all fighting, you know, pulled through the whole series. Yeah.
And I love
being that happily ever after.
Particularly though when you do like a series and you have a secondary character in there, you know, you're looking at them through one character's eyes, but then when you go to write their book, you're seeing them through other people's eyes. So you can make them look a little bit different. You know what I mean? One may have appeared needy in one book, but really they're not. It's just their sister was kind of, you were seeing them through the sister's eyes, who always thought her sister was just very needy. But in the next book, she's really not. It's just, it's perception, you know, and I think that's fun too. When you take a series and you can go from book to book, you can look at things through a different filter and change things up.
Well, and we all do it. I mean, we're kind of everybody's who they are at their core, but you're a different person for your, you know, significant other versus your brother versus your sister, your parents, you know, your friends. And so like you're saying, seeing through that different lens. And so it's funny to see even, you know, still my brothers. It's like, really, you guys like that? I mean, like in the sense of that movie or that you read those books or you watch that or you went to that, you know, it's like, oh wow. So it's fun to see and help them. So you've got this other character, but I mean, you've written, 10, 12 books? And
I did 14th, the 14th one just came out in October.
So you have, is there a character that you have it in one of your series that you haven't written about yet, but you plan to or people are asking?
Oh, yeah, and that's how I got to this particular book, Second Chance Christmas, that just came out. It was, you know, it's small town, big family, and so there's 5 brothers and sisters. One at the beginning of the series, one is already married, the older sister, and has a child. And so the first 2 books are the 2 older brothers who are second and third in line in the family, and also overarching that is their mother, who's a widow, who has kind of the secondary story is kind of this seasoned relationship. So what happened was those were published with Penguin Random House, the first 2, and then I left them and went on to the romantic suspense, the 3 West Point Secret Service agents, and bloggers and readers. I would get mail. I would see people at conferences like, well, when are you going to finish the McAllisters? You know, they're our favorite family. We want more of them. And so that's how I got back into this writing this Christmas book. There's still a brother and a sister, and actually now a stepdaughter or a stepsister, I guess, hanging out there that, you know, I wanted to write about. And as I was in there, you're going back into this world, and all these other characters kind of filter in. I'm like, oh, that person could use a book. And so it's you kind of expand the world as you go into it. But there's also someone from my football books that I get letters about all the time, and I kind of know her story, but I really want to do her justice. So I'm really waiting to flesh it out and put it where it needs to be, because she's kind of had a rocky road of it at the beginning. So I don't want to just kind of you know, fluff her off and write anything just to satisfy people's you know, reading wants. So I want her to be happy.
Right. Isn't that funny how we just were so devoted to making these fictional people just blissful.
Really?
Yeah. And why not? You know, I mean, we should. So the book that you just mentioned, Second Chance Christmas, is from the Chances Inlet series, and then the book that you were talking about for your football series is the Out of Bounds series. Is that correct? Or is it the Milwaukee Growlers?
Yes.
Okay.
No, that one was from the Out of Bounds. She's was in the last book of the Out of Bounds series, and she kind of and it was funny because I never finished that epilogue because again I really wanted to resolve something with her, and I finally wrote the epilogue years later and put it out there, and I think that's what stoked everybody's interest. They're like, well, wait a minute, now we really need her book. So at some point she will get it, but there's at least 4 in the pipeline right now, and I write really slowly.
Right.
So
when you go back and do these series, what method do you use? Because everyone talks about different methods of story Bibling, and you know, some people use Excel spreadsheets, and you know, some people have friends that are really nice and like put stuff together so you don't forget what your hero's, you know, brother's eye color was in book 1 when it's his story.
Exactly.
So I mean, what do you do to keep organized?
A little bit of both. It's really bad. I have like this notebook full of sticky notes, but I also have one reader, my college roommate, who, and she's really funny. She can't read a book unless she knows what the character looks like from page 1. So she hates it when I wait to describe someone till we're further in the page. So before I even give her the arc to read, I have to say he has this color eyes and this color hair and he's this tall, and then she'll go find, you know, some relevant actor or model or whatever to kind of use. Whereas I don't like to have someone in my head when I'm writing a book. I forget what book it was, and now I'm gonna mess it up. But it's Jennifer Cruz, and she was writing with someone else, and I can see his face, but I can't remember his name. But anyway, I forget the name of the book. I think it was Alice and the Hitman. Yeah. And he was equating the character Alice as being like Xena Warrior Princess, and I was like, oh, you just ruined the book for me. That's not who I pictured when I was reading it. You know? So I'm very careful about that because everybody kind of draws their own picture in their mind as they're reading a book. But again, there's some people like my roommate who has to know up front. So it's great because she writes all of that down, or either that or she can't have a photographic memory. She was struck by lightning about 18 years ago and survived it. So she does, you know, so kind of like, you must write all this down. But there are things that she remembers, and that's one of the things she remembers. And she has to read books in order. It's very, very funny. But she likes to know what they look like and where they lived and who's older. And so she keeps perfect track of that for me, and I'll call her. But I mean, when I went back to this series, Second Chance, it's been 5 years, I think, since I'd written the last book. So I did go and reread the first 2, just to kind of get an idea and get a feel and where things were in the town. I think I'm to the point, if there are going to be more books, I'm going to have to do a map of the town, you know, things like that. But and that's something I'll probably outsource to one of my readers who they're always ready to jump in with that. So.
It's funny because, you know, it's hard to remember. You'd think people are like, well, you remember. I'm like, I don't even remember what I had for breakfast sometimes. So to ask me about a specific detail, tiny detail of a character that I did create, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's impossible to remember it all.
It's very hard. I can't even remember my kids' birthdays. So, you know, trying to remember a character's eye color is like, there's probably 1 or 2, and that I remember because I think one of them, you know, he kept referring to her as the girl with the whiskey eyes. So you know, okay, she has, you know, kind of this amber eye color, and she was a blonde, and I knew that. But there are others where I'm like, wait, what color was this person's eyes, and how tall was he, or whatever. But so. You got to start keeping track as you do the series, and I will, I think, with this one be much more on top of having a series Bible running all along, because if I want to do 7 or 8 books, like as I can see in the pipeline, there's already 3 that I know that are coming. Then I really need to be more careful with it.
Right. So you're hybriding. You're a hybrid writer. So you've done indie, you've done publisher, you've done a mix of everything. Right. And so you finding that balance of which to post, when to publish when, and your calendar. I mean, how do you?
The calendar.
Do you just?
Well, now I'm 100%.
Yeah. I mean, how do you do that for
indie.
your deadline? Go ahead.
Well, and that's the thing. You know, when when you're with a publisher, you have a pretty hard deadline. And my husband, really, he loves me being indie because you have more control of things, except for the deadline part. He's like, I really like this when I knew it was going to get ugly around here. Now I don't even know when that's coming.
Yeah.
So, he's like, when I have to buy 4 bags of chocolate and know that, it's deadline week or whatever. But I think now it's become, for me, more of a business. There's so much more than just writing, which on the one hand is overwhelming, but on the other hand, I like knowing what my schedule is, and I like knowing, again, when I have to really focus on things. In this business, if you don't have a book coming out every 6 to 9 months, it's very hard to keep the sales up. So I pretty much, I know in January and February, all I'm going to be doing is writing, like nothing else. I was supposed to be writing a little more this month. I had some family stuff come up, and I'm not going to push myself through the holidays. I'm kind of just keeping an even schedule, and so I know I'll have a half a book to write in January and February to get something out in May. But and then I have another book I know that was set up in the end of Second Chance Christmas. I mean, I even gave them the prologue. People are going to want that, so it's got to come out next December. So I know what my schedule is. It's just factoring in now all the other stuff that goes with it. And you have to be. I found you have to be much more disciplined when you're doing it indie, because again, there's so much other stuff that's into it, and I have to really segment my day. As nope, my butt has to be in the chair for at least these 4 hours, or I'm never going to make this deadline.
So
and
do you
turn
off your phone? It's like I don't answer anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you are in the zone.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay.
I have, downstairs I have a computer that only has Word on it, and that's all I do. My phone is down there, but it's on silent, and now not so much because my kids are adults. It's not like they're, both are out of college. I'm not going to have any of these major emergencies. I do have an elderly parent that I have, but I know what that number is, and if it comes up on the phone, I would answer it. But usually now I have a dedicated time from 11 o'clock till about 4 o'clock in the day that and I'll take a break in the middle to walk the dog, and that's it. And then, the rest of the day is advertising and answering emails, all that fun stuff. But I can do that at night too, while I'm doing something else. So
yeah, it doesn't need that
really
same brain
organized.
Power. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's interesting because people talk about, wouldn't you rather do indie because you could, but publishers, they'll do, it's like, well, publishers will announce your book's coming out and there is some marketing, but honestly, they have so many other people. They're not going to be continually promoting you. It's your job to promote yourself. Period.
Job. So if I was
no matter what you
and I was doing it anyway, I was doing it anyway. So why didn't I just? And there's a lot going on right now. I do have a series that I am talking with 2 editors about that they're really interested in, but it's just a matter of when I want to fit it in. And it's one I've been talking about for about 2 years. So I know that, and I know there's interest in it. It's more women's fiction-y. So I'm probably will make time for that in 2023. I'm not 100% sure. And as my husband says, it depends on what they offer, and in my case, it's going to have to be, I don't care about money. It's assistance. You know what I mean? It's like, do the marketing. Don't pay me, pay it out there. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. But I'm content right now where I am. It's really nice to still interact with readers every day, and people are still buying the book, and it got unbelievable reviews, which I was really surprised about. So both of them, but I had 2 come out independently this year that I was a nervous wreck about, and they came out just as well as the ones that were traditionally published. So I'm happy about that.
And honestly, when it comes down to it, I know that when that whole indie stuff started back in 2010, 2011, there was this whole discussion, and it sounded eerily familiar to when you could get digital books versus print, and it was that same of no self-respecting writer will, only do ebooks, no self-respecting writer will do indie, and then you find that if you don't really have a grasp of honestly both, it doesn't matter if you do both, whether it be published with a publisher or an indie, you should have at least some idea. And the idea of people buying your book, like physically, is nice, but, it's really cool when you can see everybody, when you have a book bub, how many people download your book today,
Exactly.
And that's a huge deal.
And I had last month, I had a book, and it was unbelievable. I mean, how many downloads I got, and I kept looking at it, going, it was free, and I got this many downloads, but I was selling books. The whole rest of the series was selling at the same time. So it's really funny because you have to make these calculated decisions. And I was very leery of doing a lot of stuff. You go to all these seminars, online webinars or whatever, and listen to these people talk, and they're like, you got to do this, you got to do this. I'm like, I'm not doing that. But I've kind of stuck my toe in the water and started doing things. I'm like, oh, maybe they're right. You do have to do, some of these things. And you're right. You have to have a grasp of the business as a whole. It doesn't matter if you're going to be totally independent or KU or whatever. You need to know what's going on over there so you can fit yourself wherever you want to be in the market. And it may be some of it, it may be all of it, it may be, one tiny little sliver. But you need to know what's going on around you. And it's ever changing.
Sure.
So
every day it's a moving target.
Yeah.
It's a crazy. So you've got these, and you're talking about you're having more books coming out next year. What is your ultimate goal? Like, ideally, how many books would you love to have published in a year, whether it be indie or traditional? Either way, is there a number?
I've always been kind of a two book a year, and that seems to work for me. I have low vision as well, so that's a whole nother, thing that comes into play when I'm working, and I can't really press any more than I'm. And plus, again, like I said, I'm a very slow writer. I don't think I'm methodical. It's just more my first draft is my first draft. I've really, in 14 books, never had to change anything around. An editor hasn't come in and said, no, this doesn't work. So it's just my process. It just takes a long time. But when it's done, it's done. And, I give myself 12 to 16 weeks to write it, and they're usually 90,000 words. And then, then you've got the marketing for another 2 to 3 months, and then you start on the next one. That's kind of where I'm at. And it's my
just
process.
Interesting.
I don't know if I can speed it up.
No, I mean, I think everybody does what they do the way they do it because it works, and you get a quality product, so therefore it's good. And we're always learning, like we're talking about. So, that might help, but it's just a thing. And some books are easier to write. Some books just are like the characters are just talking to you all the time. And then others, you just have the idea and you're like, come on, and like, let's go.
Yeah.
You're
and
being
it's funny
really rude.
You'll come up to you'll have a title, and you're like, and this person does this and does that, and I'm like, okay, well, now what happens, And that's happened to me a lot, where I can get that first chapter or two, and it's really great, and they're interacting, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, where do I go from here? I know where I want to end it, but, I've got to really get them through and get another 20 chapters in there.
As we all love the sagging middle.
The sagging middle. I'm like, it's really there. It's really there.
Yeah.
But
I know. But
if everybody could do it, then everybody would be writing books. So that's but I keep telling myself, I'm like, why is this so hard? Well, because, and it's, again, if everybody could dive off a diving board, they'd be in the Olympics. You know what I mean? It's kind of the same thing. Those Olympic athletes have something within them, and you and I, we have these people talking to us in our heads that we need to get out. And so it's just kind of a different experience.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I think, I've talked to several, I have teenagers, and one of my kids was saying, I'm going to be a YouTuber, and I was like, you won't even pick up your socks. I mean, do you know how, it takes you forever just to clean up your room. Do you really have any idea how many hours these people have spent just to get people to look at, to get 100 followers? It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Social media is a killer.
It is, and it's in a way kind of a great equalizer, but of course it can be an awful place. So it's just finding the balance, and again, finding the balance. What has been your favorite favorite input from a reader, a favorite letter from a reader?
Oh, it's got to be. And when I made her a character in my book, it's a friend of mine's best friend's mother. So, and a good friend of mine, her best friend died of, I believe it's colon cancer, and she still keeps in touch with this woman's mother because they grew up in the same town. And then she keeps in touch with the grandmother, and her name's Evie, and it was probably my first book. And this woman at the time might have been 89 or 90. No, she had to be in her late 80s because she's 96 now. So, but she sent me this letter, and she said, I had the best time reading this book, and my whole bridge club read it, and we all laughed. And it was probably not the first letter I got from a reader, but it's very early on. And it was just her energy level and just the fact that she said, there's a lot that I miss out on in life because I'm older. She says, but I can always get it now through books. And I really felt like I experienced, what the character experienced in your book. And it gave me just such a great weekend. She said she read it in a whole weekend. And I was like, oh, this is lovely. And so she sent me a couple letters, of the other books. And she ended up, I made her a character in the books. It's Holiday at Magnolia Bay.
Okay.
And she was a character, and that one, I think, an octogenarian, older woman who her grandson is a Navy SEAL, and he comes back and he thinks someone's trying to take her inheritance or whatever, and that's and really the woman's giving her inheritance to the marine biologist who runs the turtle rescue farm. They live in it's a fictional town in South Carolina, Magnolia Bay, that we created at Cooley. So anyway, and Evie's been in a lot of my books, and it's really funny because I will request to every time to large print books and send them to her. And the other day she texted me and she says, well, I said, do you want to get it on audio? Because we haven't done this one on audio yet. And she says, no, I still like to hold the book in my hand and read it, even though she's got to hold it really close because her eyes are getting bad. But I send her the large print, and that's it, So I think that's one of the ones. And I love that because I've never met her. I know her tangentially, like I said. And that's how the first letter got to me, because she knew my friend Allison and gave it to her, and she brought it over to me. And now we've been pen pals ever since. But it's fun, and it's fun to hear what people say, and I enjoy it. And this one that's out now, a lot of the advanced readers they would send me emails or texts and be like, I'm hungry, this book has so much food in it, I'm hungry, there's too many food references. And of course it's a holiday book, so there's lots of food, and there's a bachelorette party with these crazy holiday cocktails, a peppertini and a gingerbread martini and all this kind of stuff. So they kept asking me, are you going to put the recipes in the back of the book? I'm like, oh my gosh, there would be too many. So I ended up creating a cookbook that readers can get online when they sign up for my newsletter. So, and we had a lot of fun with that. And that was funny because a lot of those people who were reading the ARC had just signed up to read it, and a couple were actually reviewers, bloggers, and I never met them before, but they were, I had contacted them on Instagram. And so they would DM me back, and they're like, okay, I'm on page whatever. Can I get the recipe for this and this and this? And I thought, wow, I didn't realize, there was so much of a food element in the book. But again, it was a holiday, so all of that is constantly referenced, and I just didn't even realize it until people started asking for the recipes. So
it's fun.
So we have a little
kind of a nice dialogue, because it's one of those things of like a neutral topic that everyone likes this. Yeah. And if you don't, but you have another recipe that's similar. I mean, it's a great conversational thing to have in a story, for sure. Yeah. So you mentioned the turtle. Fun. You mentioned the turtle rescue. Have you gone to one in?
I have.
Aren't they fun?
In Jekyll Island. Oh, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
In Jekyll Island, I think we spent all day there one time, and my kids were, I don't know, one elementary and one middle school, I think at this point, and we got to go behind the scenes, and they're in those big, some are in the larger pools, but the rest are in those little plastic kiddie pools, in the back, and we actually would always stay in the beach. It's Oak Island or Caswell Beach, is just at the bottom tip of North Carolina where it faces South Carolina, and we were there one summer, I'll never forget, and they had the turtle turtle nests out, and they have them all marked where the people watch them. They have the fencing around it and everything, and all of a sudden we hear all these people outside at night, and they were hatching, and we ran out there, and of course it's dark, and you can't take any pictures, you can't really see, but you could kind of see them like bubbling up, and they just come out like it's a geyser. They all are coming out, and then they're running to the water. So it's just fun to see, and I really wanted that in the book, and it was very hard because that's a Christmas book, so I had to start it in August, and then of course they're separated until they have the big, reunion, the grand gesture at Christmas time. But because I really wanted the whole turtle hatching in there. But
it's really interesting because we've gone a few times down in South Padre, and that's the Kemp Ridley sea turtle, and they, hatch on there and in top of Mexico, and then they go all around. And it's funny because I was like, you have to be there really early because once they hatch, they got, if anybody knows or doesn't know, they have all these different nests that they have, and then they know which ones have been there about the amount of time, so they may or may not have a release, because if the turtles hatch at 2 a.m, they're letting them go. I mean, it's like they're going. If it hatches at 5. Yeah, if they hatch at 5, then, you'll probably have a release that morning. So all these people around, and they're showing us the turtles. Of course, you can't touch them. And so they go, okay, and then they have people in the water, so, seagulls don't come down and, have breakfast. And you have all these turtles, and then everyone's like, yay! And then I guess everyone thinks it's just like, okay, everybody's in the water, and ta-da! Well, some turtles just really aren't interested in going anywhere. No. And they just stay there, and you're going, okay, time to go now. And they're just like, whatever. And I think my son went, well, that's why they're extinct. That's fair.
Well, this one that we saw, it was interesting because it was at night, and then the next morning they were out there, and they kind of, they didn't use a shovel, but they kind of prodded. There were still some in the nest, and so they did kind of like a second. The first time they all went out on their own, but the second time they had some nature biologists and people there that were actually trying to get them out of the nest and get them to, and of course by this time it's broad daylight, because I think it was, they come out when it's low tide, so the first one was at night, and then this was late in the morning, and there's all these people standing there, and I'm sure, same thing, my son's like, well, I wouldn't come out with all these people here, so it's kind of the same thing, but yeah.
Okay, Junior, you got to go now. No, that's all right. Yeah. Solid. Good. No worries. But those little moments are fun to write in books. Yeah. Were you able to take a lot of pictures when you were able to go, so you could kind of, pull back on that and say, okay, let's see. Because, we all see stuff. We're like, oh, I got to write about that. But actually going back. So when I went to the beach last time, I had my phone, and I was recording myself saying things like, the ocean sounds like this. And because we all know this if we've been to the ocean, but again, being there, it's a different sensory.
It's a different,
so,
yeah.
It's
with the turtles,
it just
because
feels different,
Right, because it was at night, you couldn't have any kind of light because they'll go to the light because they're going towards the moon or whatever. So they were like, no, you can't take any picture. Of course, my husband, didn't know that and took one picture. So we do have a picture. He got yelled at an excuse. But the next day, when it was, daylight, I had pictures of them going out. And so, but the image of them coming up like a geyser out of the sand, and they're just all crawling over top of one another and just crawling out. That's something that, I don't know if I'll ever forget, because it was just so unbelievable to watch. I was like, this is nature, right here. Very cool. Very, very cool.
It's bizarre. We've watched, a lot of us have watched the National Geographic ones, and it's interesting how you'll see, okay, all these turtles, they lay their eggs and then they go back. And then it's either they all hatch independently or they all hatch at once. Right. And at once, of course, the ones that hatch independently, of course, they're like, and predators, and like David Attenborough, and predators are waiting, and my kids are like, no, because they're like, why doesn't the cameraman do something? But then you see the one where all of them hatch, and these predators are like, what is going on? They're so confused.
They're like, it's a buffet.
But there's so many, it's like they can't even begin do it. So, yeah, well, now everybody's listening knows all about sea turtle releases, baby turtle releases.
Sea turtles,
but if you do have a chance, you should go. Any sort of animal release,
definitely.
I think, amazing. So if you have an opportunity, absolutely should go. So other than that, and you've got some wonderful drinks. So if somebody wants to have Tracy's drink recipe book, you can sign up for her newsletter on her website, and it's Tracy, TracySolheim. And I'm going to have all her social media and all her website links in the write-up of the show. But you can sign up for her website. You can get that recipe book. And so what other exciting, you've got probably 2 books coming. You were talking about a women's fiction book coming possibly 2023 time frame. Yeah. What haven't you written about yet that you want to?
Oh, my gosh. I have 2 booksellers. It's really funny, 2 independent bookstores here that are within, 2 miles of each other. And I do signings at both of them. And both the owners are very good friends. And one of them is desperate for me to write historical fiction.
Really?
And it's funny. Yeah, she's like, I think you do really well with historical fiction. It's something that would sell. I think she's thinking in terms of a Kristen Hanna type thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm not there yet. But so we were talking about it the other day. I did a signing, and I said if I ever did something, it would be the Revolutionary War, because I spent a lot of time in Lexington, Massachusetts in the mid-'70s during the bicentennial and everything. My father was stationed up there in the Boston area, and so that's an area that I've always just been fascinated with. So I think if I ever moved on to something else, it would be historical fiction, and it would probably be during the Revolutionary War time frame, the 1770s area. So,
wow,
which is, I think, really interesting. It'd be fun, I think. And there's not a lot out there. I mean, there used to be, John Jakes and all that kind of stuff, but there's not a lot out there that's recent. So I think that would be fun. It'd be fun to research. And like I said, Johnny Tremaine is probably one of my all-time favorite books that I read as a kid, and I still love all that, and all that went on during that time in 1775, all that in the Boston area. So I think that would be something that I would probably gravitate to if I decided to do something totally different than what I'm doing.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of people shy away from historical because of the research. I mean, you have to be.
Exactly.
Well, you should be correct. So, nobody's got zippers in 1758. Exactly. Nobody.
Right.
So no one's saying y'all. And nobody.
Right, exactly. And in my previous career, I was that's what I did for Congress. I was a researcher and an investigator. So it's not something that I shy away from. And even every book that I write, like even with the recipes and stuff, I did a lot of research on those. And the Secret Service ones, oh my gosh, the White House, I had so much fun. I felt like I could spend days just going through the White House Historical Society and looking at what's in each room and how they decide what goes in. And then there's this whole repository with all of the stuff, the paintings and the furniture from the White House from, when it was built, and that they can switch out over time. And I spent like a week, looking at all that even online, and it's a sinkhole for me. Sometimes research can be a bad thing because I get too into it. But I was, again, I think the reason why I picked that subject is I would love to read more about, the Revolutionary War and you read period pieces and things and biographies from that time, and that's where you kind of get information, even, go to the archives and get letters and things like that. And that's where you get kind of your feel for the research and what was available during that time period.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because it's you're sitting there going, wow, this is how they did this everyday thing that I didn't even think about.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. So for me, that wouldn't be hard.
Right. Well, my daughter's one of my daughters is working on. She had to do something about the Renaissance. We're talking about the Northern Renaissance and the Southern Renaissance in Italy, and we're talking about these different things. And I have always told my kids, I said, truly, because of the time frame, I said I'm truly amazed that the church allowed the printing press to exist, because it is one of those it's one of those things, and I'm thinking, was it a geography thing? They didn't know where it was. I mean, they didn't know. I mean, just because that really just shifted the whole power structure big time.
It shifted the whole world, yeah.
The whole thing. And so to read stuff, to see things like that, people handwritten letters, and I just can't even imagine. You know, you're thinking about this person writing this. It's wild.
Writing
it's
it
crazy.
out.
Yeah.
You know,
it's so, and it's funny because you talked about all this stuff that when people are in the White House, you know, the stuff that's there before you get there, you don't get to take. So that's the people's stuff, and there's all sorts of different things that they switch out. So to see all the stuff that we don't necessarily get to see, because, I mean, obviously the White House is not on display all the time.
Right.
Different rooms.
And like 1/10 of what could furnish it and be on the walls is in there. The rest of it is in this warehouse in South Washington, D.C. And it's fascinating because that's kind of, you know, it's, again, like you said, it belongs to all of us, and it's stuff that, you know, is part of it, are at this point are treasures. You know, they're a couple hundred years old, and you know, and some of the other stuff, you know, the more recent stuff, some of the presidents get it donated, you know, more the modern art, but then to the White House, but a lot of it is donated and it becomes part of the collection, which was really, I didn't know that. It was really fascinating to talk to some of the people there and find out. Yeah.
Wow. The history would just be phenomenal. My kids and I, we watched National Treasure, and my kids are like, so is there a president's book? I'm like, honey, I don't know.
I love that movie.
And I said, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, if anyone hasn't seen it, it's about, you know, the National Treasure was about the Declaration of Independence. This is about the president's book and stuff like this, City of Gold. And they have these two desks that are matched, and one's in Buckingham Palace and one's in the White House. And you've got all these little ways it was hiding stuff. And but I told the kids, I said, more than likely, I know that when an outgoing president usually writes a letter to the incoming president and leaves it on the desk. Right. But then you also, I'm sure, I mean, I would think that there'd be even like just a notebook saying, you know, this hallway goes, you know, this is bathroom's closer. Ask this person. Also, she makes the best chocolate snacks. You know, I mean, I don't know.
Well, there's a briefing book that all the staff leave for the next person that takes their position. And it's kind of, you know, it's just, it's a briefing book that I think part of it has, you know, been built up over time. In other words, they don't change a lot of it, but as technology changes, obviously they update things. But then there's, you know, they're supposed to put their own spin on it and leave a letter or two to the person taking over, and then you would include kind of these most recent things in there. But it's usually a job description and where everything is in the White House and who you go to get this or that, you know, which is probably more critical because some of the staff, you know, does stay there, the actual staff for the House, and so you do need to know, you know, who's got the plunger, where is that, you know.
Who's got that? If you bother so-and-so at night, you better have a nice cup of coffee waiting when they show up, you know, those kind of things that are actually kind of important. Because, you know, we got to work together. We got to work with each other. So I think it's absolutely important. I so appreciate you joining me today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much
for having me. So Tracy is out there. She's on her website, TracySolheim. Again, the link is going to be in the write-up of the show, as well as all of her social media, and you can find Tracy, and she's got tons of books, so make sure to get your Kindle ready or your whatever e-reader you use, because you will stay plenty busy. And please come back and tell us when your next stuff is coming out. We want to talk to you some more.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yay!
You know, I wish everybody a very happy holiday and a better. We're hoping 2022 is going to get better.
I think so. I think we're on a good. incline here, so that's good.
Yep.
Everybody, stay safe and keep on reading. Absolutely.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
This show brought to you by Circle of Seven Productions. www.cosproductions.com. Please be sure to subscribe and welcome to our circle.